What weapon does more damage in the 2024 rules of D&D 5e? Two-weapon fighting or heavy weapons? Here's another question. What would be the most truly sustainable damage you could possibly do every single round with the new 2024 rules, if you tried to build for it? I'm talking expending 0 resources, just straight up Captain America style, I can do this all day damage. Well, today we're going to try and answer both of those questions. Welcome to D4. Hey everybody, so here at D4, every week I take a deep dive into character builds for my favorite role-playing games. Usually that means Dungeons & Dragons. I like to crunch numbers about them, theorycraft about them, not so that I can tell you the right way or the best way to play a character, but to explore one potential way to build something in the hopes of creating a character that's both really fun, but also really powerful to play. So if you also really enjoy creating characters for your favorite role-playing games, or if you're just looking for tips or ideas on how to build something you're thinking about playing, or if you just enjoy theory crafting, then welcome home. This is where you belong, and I'm so glad you're here. So thanks for being here. Thanks for watching. My name's Colby. Right, so I've done a few builds for the new 2024 rules now. One exploring a heavy weapon build, the Blade Lock, right? And then 2 now that have gone with dual wielding, the Vengeance Paladin from a couple weeks ago, and then last week's Valor Bard. Do we know which setup is going to be the go-to for damage dealing, the new meta? Not really. I mean, in general, if you've got a reliable way to add damage to every attack, then making more attacks, like you can now with two-weapon fighting, thanks to the Nick property and the dual wielder feat, right, can potentially pull ahead. But hey, that's not necessarily always the case. Though the Vengeance Paladin had the upper hand numbers-wise at early levels, the Blade Lock outperformed from level 9 on anyways. And I mean, as for the Valor Bard, yeah, Conjure Minor Elementals is broken, so that's almost not a fair apples to apples comparison. My question is, what if we weren't using spells to augment our damage and we're just looking at straight martials? I think it's an interesting question. A few months ago, I did this for 2014 rules, right? The all-day build up there. A truly sustainable damage build. My only regret for that video is that I didn't do it sooner, like 4 years sooner, because yeah, as much as I and others like to talk about sustainable damage, a lot of times we don't really mean sustainable, right? I've repeated this many times on this channel, but in case you didn't know, my minimum requirement to consider a build sustainable is that you can do said amount of damage round after round for at least one entire combat encounter per day. And I mean, I even allow for like a setup round. That's a pretty loose definition of sustainable, right? It might work really well for sustainable damage at some tables where you only have like 1 or 2 combat encounters per long rest. That's kind of how my table usually goes. But some builds, at least, that I've done in the past, might not work all that great if you're at one of those tables that tends to take like a short rest every 2 or 3 combat encounters and has like 5 to 8 encounters per day, yeah? And so, yes, the math nerd in me who loves the idea of a character being truly and totally sustainable is super appealing. A build that uses 0 expendable resources to do damage and also requires no setup or like buy-in from the DM or certain circumstances in a fight for it to work. It just works all of the time, every time. I call this like an optimized baseline for damage per round, DPR. I know a lot of other people who do builds out there for D&D have their own definition of baseline, and I'm not here to say that mine is better or worse. I just really want to figure out what the most damage I could do every round would be if I wanted to truly be able to say this character, as long as they weren't dead, right, or incapacitated or whatever, could do this damage every single round of combat, no matter how many rests they got, no matter how many combat encounters they'd already had that day, etc., etc. I think it's both interesting to know, but also helpful for us as we continue to do sustained damage builds with the 2024 rules. We can compare these other sustained damage builds to this optimized baseline, right? And say, okay, how powerful is this other build really, considering that I might be spending fairly limited resources to get to this level, yeah? Plus, this will let us definitively put to rest the question on which weapon setup a straight martial character should go with. Won't it? Heavy weapons or two-weapon fighting? Well, spoiler alert, the answer is both. It depends. And I love the fact that there's not a clear winner here. So let's talk about why. Oh, and yes, sorry, ranged weapon lovers. They kind of got nerfed in the 2024 rules. Not saying they're not viable. I still think you can make good builds with them. I'm planning on doing so in the near future, but they're probably not going to be able to keep up damage-wise with melee builds. And I'm kind of okay with that. Some of you are going to be okay with that. Some of you are going to be upset. Anyways, let's jump into D&D episode number 181, the new baseline. The optimized baseline? How about the 2024 baseline? Big thanks to my good friend Randall Hampton for the fantastic artwork that he created for this build. I love the kind of weapon master Swiss Army knife look that this one has. He's such a great artist. If you'd be interested in following him on social media to see the other stuff that he's done, or to maybe see if you could commission him to do some art for your character or your entire party, I'll put links in the video description, as always, on how to do so. But first, are you guys familiar with one of my favorite third-party content creators out there, Roll for Combat? You probably are. They've sponsored videos on the channel before, and they're hugely popular among fans of third-party creators. I love the stuff that they do. Well, they are sponsoring the video this week again to get word out about their new to Kickstarter book, Battle Zoo Bestiary, Elemental Storm. Now, in case you're not familiar with Roll for Combat's Battle Zoo books, like this beauty here, or the Strange and Unusual Battle Zoo Bestiary, another good one. Every one of these bestiaries are fantastic. What they do is they take submissions from aspiring monster designers the world over, put each submission through a rigorous 2-round judging process where first the public ranks the monsters and then industry professionals score the entries that made it past the first round based on a number of criteria, and the cream of the crop makes it into the bestiary book, where every single monster shows up with a creator's name as well as the rank that they earned. And the latest of these, yes, is going to be the Elemental Storm Bestiary. The Kickstarter is going on right now, and importantly, everything in the book is compatible with both the 2024 rules of D&D and Pathfinder 2e. But also, I mean, if all that this book had was 170 plus awesome, beautiful, terrifying monsters based around the elements, right? And no, I don't just mean earth, air, fire, and water, though yes, those, but also the elements of music and space and time, among others. If that's all you got here, then the book would be totally worth the cost. But you actually get so much more than that. There are monster hunter rules in this book that can be used with any class or subclass, emulating dynamic abilities from your favorite monster hunting games, where you're like climbing onto massive monsters to get past defenses, right? Attacking specific body parts to take them down one piece at a time, etc. In addition, there are dozens of new elemental-based spells, and even as always, Roll for Combat's awesome monster parts crafting system, where you can take pieces of the monsters that you've defeated to craft gear and infuse items with monstrous elemental magic. Finally, every creature in the book has had an animated token created for it even, that are going to be compatible with almost every VTT. So I really hope you'll take a moment to check out this Kickstarter and give it your support. I am confident that you'll love the product as much as I've loved everything that I've gotten from them to date. I'm putting a link in the video description and in the pinned comment as always to help you get there, and enjoy all that this fantastic book has to offer. So huge thanks to Roll for Combat for sponsoring, you know what, not just this video, but for your support over the years. I really appreciate you guys, and I love what you're doing, so keep it up. I can't wait to see the Elemental Storm book when it's finished. Okay, let's get back to the build. Okay, but here's the thing. I'm actually going to do 2 builds today. They're very similar in that both of them will be mostly fighter, but one is going to be if you're playing the character up to level 10, and one will be you're starting at level 11 or higher. Though I will talk about how I'd build this character if I were planning on taking them all the way from like 1 to 20 or whatever. Cool? Oh, and one final note, there is a high likelihood that there's something that we could do in-game that I've missed that might let us eke out a little more damage than what I end up doing today. Or, for that matter, I'm sure that in the future there will be some new feature or ability or subclass that Wizards of the Coast will put out that would let us do even more damage sustainably. Or both of those things might be true, right? This is the best I was able to come up with for today, and maybe we revisit and update or modify in the future. As always, check the pinned comment where I always post errata or corrections or updates, right? Okay, so build number 1, the level 1 to 10 version of this build. At level 1, for our starting class, yes, we're starting fighter this time, but it's actually more than a dip. Because yeah, fighters got a lot of great updates in the new player's handbook. But to be fair, I think most of the best ones are either also available to other classes, like weapon masteries, or they already had them in 2014, like more feats than other classes, or that juicy third attack at level 11, right? So why am I going fighter in the new early game baseline instead of barbarian, like I did for the 2014 version? Two main reasons. One, because, as we've discussed previously, thanks to the change to Great Weapon Master, now that we no longer suffer a -5 penalty to hit with that feat, advantage via the Barbarian's Reckless Attack, right, isn't quite as important as it used to be. That, coupled with the boosts to dual wielding, means that we end up getting a little more mileage out of a fighting style that barbarians don't get, right? And an extra feat at level 6 than we would if we were going barbarian. This, of course, is assuming that we are spending 0 resources to do this damage, and don't forget, rage is a resource that you can only use a limited number of times per day. If we were able to count raging, then barbarians would be a little closer to fighters here. They might even take the lead, but for true, I can do this all day damage, I think fighters are at the top of the heap now. As for our species, I think I'm gonna go halfling again. Shoot, our most sustained damage build's gonna go halfling from now on? No, but I do think there will be a lot of them. I wouldn't be surprised if it ended up being like my most common species for sustained damage builds anyways. I might be wrong. Their luck feature isn't a huge boost to our sustained damage, but being able to reroll ones on our attack rolls is something, and you can do it every time you roll a 1, even on saving throws and ability checks. So yeah, halflings are solid. I mean, they always were. It just maybe took me a little longer to come around to them. As for our background, I'm gonna say, as I probably always will, pick an old background or build a custom one if you can, letting you pick whatever ability score increases and origin feat that you want, but if you can't, I would go with soldier here, as that gives us both options to boost ability scores that we want and the amazing origin feat, Savage Attacker. Which is what I would take for my origin feat. Wait, what? Savage Attacker sucks! You're right, it does. So, let me explain. I know channel veterans get tired of this kind of thing, but I have to explain things like this to people who are new to the channel. I don't actually recommend that you take this feat. It's bad. It was bad in 2014, and it's arguably worse in 2024, because even though it got buffed in that it now works for all weapon attacks instead of just melee weapon attacks, that's actually not a good thing, because now more people will be tempted to take this feat. All it does is let you roll your weapon damage twice when you hit with a weapon attack, and then choose either roll. But you can only do it once per turn, not every time you hit. That actually would make it a little bit better. And unlike in Baldur's Gate 3, take a drink, it's been a minute, the only dice that you're re-rolling here are the weapon dice, not anything else you might be adding to the attack, like a smite or a sneak attack or something. But since, yes, I'm interested in exploring what's possible damage-wise, and for this build, what's possible damage-wise in a no setup required non-resource spending way, this is really the only origin feat that's going to increase our I can do this all day damage on the spreadsheet, though that increase is generally going to be less than 1 point of damage per round total on average. So yeah, like, I probably would not take this feat, get tough, or alert, or lucky, or musician, or almost anything else. I'm taking it on this build to see just how far I can push these numbers, okay? Okay, as for our ability scores, I'm gonna say, assuming that we're going the point buy method as always, I'm gonna say let's start with a 15 strength and then take a +2 from our background there, a 15 constitution and a +1 there, and then a 14 dexterity. Now, as for equipment, I'm gonna say let's grab some hand axes, a scimitar, and scale mail armor. So, right, we're not going with a dexterity-based build here, meaning that even though we are dual wielding and thus still want light weapons, right, they don't need to be a short sword and a scimitar like I've been doing so far. So why not use a hand axe instead of a short sword? It still has the Vex weapon mastery like the short sword, but it also has the thrown property in case you need to make a ranged attack with it. And yeah, since we don't need finesse weapons, which the short sword is, and the hand axe is not, let's go hand axe. Damage die is the same. It's a d6. I would, though, maybe just make sure to carry a few of them, so if you did need to throw one, you'd have more on hand for follow-up attacks. The scimitar is still the highest damage-dealing light weapon that has the nick property, though, and yes, of course, we will want that. Since at level 1, fighters get to learn 3 weapon masteries, and yeah, I'd take the hand axe for Vex, so if we land an attack with it, our next attack before the end of our next turn has advantage, and then a scimitar for Nick so that we can make the offhand attack that we can make when wielding 2 different light weapons, one in each hand, right, as part of our action instead of as part of our bonus action, leaving our bonus action free. Awesome. As for the third weapon that you're going to want to master, I'm just going to say pick your favorite. Maybe grab a dagger or a light hammer if you want to be able to throw both, a hand axe and whatever's in your offhand, which we actually will be doing a little bit later, spoiler alert, or a club. We could replace a hand axe there if we didn't need to be throwing, right, and we wanted to slow. We'd rather have that than Vex. I don't know. It's cool. I love having options. As for our fighting style that we get at Fighter 1, we're going to be taking the 2-weapon fighting style, of course, so that the attacks from our offhand weapon can add our strength modifier to their damage. We also get Second Wind still as a Fighter 1, and we get 2 uses of it per day, but we recover 1 on a short rest now, so slight change from the 2014 rules. And for now, we can just use Second Wind to heal ourselves with a bonus action for a d10 plus our fighter level, right? Pretty nice heal for now, and Second Wind gets a lot more uses as we gain fighter levels, which I love. At level 2, we get Action Surge. Oh my goodness, it took me this long to build a character that got Action Surge. Dang. Okay, so yes, Action Surge, still amazing. It lets us take 2 actions instead of 1, once per short rest, right? The only change to it is that now we can't use that extra action to take the magic action, which is what you do when you cast a spell or use a magic item. That's okay. This can still make for some great burst damage once in a while, and that's fantastic. We also get a new feature here, Tactical Mind, and this says that when we fail an ability check, we can spend a use of our Second Wind to roll a d10 and add that roll to the ability check we made instead of use it to regain hit points, right? Best of all, if the roll still fails, our use of Second Wind isn't even expended. This gives fighters some really nice utility out of combat, and I love it. You know what else I love? All of my channel members. You guys are so awesome. Thank you so much for your support. I could not do this without you. If you're not a member of the channel, I'd love it if you would consider joining. There's a little button down there that says join. If you click on it, you can see what little perks you might get by becoming a member. Things like the write-ups that I do for each of these builds to help you recreate it a little more easily, access to the D4 community Discord server, and even access to the monthly live Q&A hangout sessions that we do, which I'm actually doing later this afternoon, and I can't wait. It's like my favorite day of the month. But if you are not interested in becoming a member or don't feel like you can afford it, that's totally fine. Just being here and watching and liking and subscribing and commenting and clicking on the notifications bell, these are all also great ways to support the channel. So thanks for just doing those things. I truly appreciate it. And you. Okay, at level 3, we get our fighter subclass, of course, as always. And as with the previous baseline build, I think if we want to truly be an all-day kind of character, we gotta go champion here. I'm not saying you should do this. I think any of the other 3 options from the new Player's Handbook are more appealing, personally, as are some of the older subclasses that aren't available in the new Player's Handbook, like Rune Knight, right? I'd probably take just about any of them over Champion if I were actually going to play this character in game, but Champion is a little better than it used to be, and more importantly for us, none of their features require us to expend a limited resource like the other 3 in the new Player's Handbook do, so here we are. First off, at this level, champions get Remarkable Athlete now instead of at level 7, and it's much better now than it was in 2014, giving us advantage on strength checks, but also on initiative rolls as well. Nice. It even lets us move up to half of our move speed without provoking opportunity attacks when we land a critical hit, which will happen more often for us than for most characters, since we still get the improved critical feature here as well, which says that, yeah, we crit on a 20 or a 19. Nice. At level 4, we get our first feat, and of course we're going to take Dual Wielder so that we can make yet another weapon attack as a bonus action, since our bonus action has been freed up thanks to the Nick property. Yes, I've been seeing a lot of comments in other Dual Wielder videos of people saying that they think that I'm misunderstanding how the Dual Wielder feat works, and I'm really not interested in arguing with you about it. The cat's out of the bag now. Monty from the Dungeon Dudes talked to Jeremy Crawford at Gen Con a few weeks ago, and Jeremy confirmed that the way that I've been talking about it is in fact how it's intended to work. Of course, I've got to put the caveat in there that this was a potentially off the record, unofficial conversation. Wizards may very well come out and say, actually, no, it works this way. Colby, you're wrong. And that's fine. If and when they do, then I can make adjustments. But until that time, I'm just going to say, yeah, if we have the Nick property and we're dual wielding light weapons, then when we get this feat at level 4, we can make 3 attacks. 2 with our action thanks to Nick, and 1 with our bonus action thanks to the dual wielder feat. And yeah, when we get extra attack next level, that's going to be 4 attacks. And you know what? I mean, that's kind of how it should work, I think, right? The fantasy of dual wielding, light weapons is that you're making more attacks than most people. Those attacks might not hit as hard, but you can make more of them. That's kind of the point. So I'm really happy that this is where we're at. Now, this time, of course, with the feat, we're going to be bumping our strength by 1 instead of dexterity, giving us a nice even 18 strength. That's awesome. And then, yes, at level 5, extra attack. So now we're getting 4 attacks per round. It's perfect. Fighters also get another new use of our second wind at level 5 called Tactical Shift. When we activate our second wind with a bonus action, I think it specifies bonus action here because Tactical Mind doesn't actually take a bonus action to use, right? We can move up to half our speed at the same time without provoking opportunity attacks. Feeling pretty mobile, this fighter, and that'll be cool to heal yourself and disengage, right? And move. Come in really handy later, especially when we start throwing weapons potentially. At level 6, fighters uniquely get another feat, right? Which is so great. And in the interest of damage overall, yeah, I'm gonna say let's just bump our strength here, capping it at 20. Just in time for our first damage report. So, what does combat look like for us? It's as simple as can be. On round 1, we just run up to our enemy and attack them 4 times. And on subsequent rounds, we keep doing the same thing. No setup, no resources, just keep swinging. Just keep swinging, just keep swinging. Is that what Dory sings? Every attack would do a d6 for the weapon, plus 5 for our strength, for a total of 46 plus 20. One note, how often are we getting advantage on our attacks thanks to the Vex weapon mastery? It's hard to calculate, though I was in a conversation last night with Ludic Savant. For those who don't know, he's the guy who made the damage calculator that I use for all of my number crunching. I link to it in every single video. Check the video description. He's a great guy. He's really smart. He is working on an updated version of the calculator for the 2024 rules, which I cannot wait for. Anyways, for now, for ease of number crunching, I'm going to say half of the time we're going to have advantage on our attacks. If your experience varies, feel free to adjust these numbers slightly, but I'm confident that we're not going to be too far off. And so, against enemies here with a 10 armor class, we would on average do 36 damage per round, and against a 15 AC, it would be 30. DPR. And compared to other sustained damage builds that I've done to date, that's not surprisingly not amazing, though it is infinitely sustainable. So yeah, this is maybe tier 4 territory. Here's an important question though. How does it compare to the old baseline using the 2014 rules? It's actually performing a little bit worse until we get to about an 18 enemy armor class at least, which isn't super unreasonable at level 6, but it's probably slightly above average. Now the reason for this is twofold. One, variant human or custom lineage wouldn't let us pick up the Great Weapon Master feat anymore, since that's a general feat and no species can get us a general feat at level 1 under the 2024 rules. That old build had 3, general feats by this level, right? Which you can't do anymore. The other reason is because of the change to the Great Weapon Master feat, which not only doesn't do extra damage with our bonus action attack that we might make with the heavy weapon, whether because we took the polearm feat or we got a crit or killed somebody, right? But Great Weapon Master also now adds less damage, just our proficiency bonus in damage instead of a flat 10, without that -5 to hit penalty from before. Essentially, what this does is it lowers the ceiling but raises the floor, right? Yes, I've crunched the numbers for a barbarian or a fighter build that goes heavy weapons instead, and at this level, it is underperforming compared to our dual wielder, and I can't help but see that as a good thing, because it means we have reasons to go one route over another, at least some of the time, depending on our build, depending on our level. Hooray for choices! But, moving on, at level 7, with extra attack secured and our strength score capped, yes, I think it's time to take some barbarian levels now. Not so that we can get rage necessarily, since as amazing as it is, and even though we get more uses of it now, 2 per long rest, but then recovering 1 of those on a short rest, thank goodness for that. I love that change. It is still an expendable resource, and I can't know for certain that you'll always have access to rage every round. At least, I'm not making that assumption for this build. Plus, it takes a bonus action to use it, so though it's a small price to pay for extra damage on every hit and resistance to bludgeoning, piercing, and slashing damage, among other things, it is still a setup. So no, we're not going to add it to the calculations today. But the good news is that it means that most of the time, if you build like I'm telling you to build here, you will actually do more damage than I claim, and that's a breath of fresh air, isn't it? As a Barbarian 1, we also get unarmored defense, but it's a trap for us, so don't use it, right? It still just allows your armor class to be 10 plus your dexterity modifier plus your constitution modifier, but for us, it would still be worse than half plate plus 2 for our dexterity. I'm assuming we'd have half plate here. I guess I should mention that up until this point, sure, you would be better off wearing plate mail if you can get it, but now that we can rage and shortly attack recklessly, you're gonna want to be in nothing heavier than medium armor, right? As those features won't work if you're wearing heavy armor. Also, barbarians do get 2 more weapon masteries, so yeah, I mean, pick your favorite here, knock yourself out. We've got 6 now. We picked up another one at Fighter 4 that I forgot to mention, so have fun with that. At level 8, we would be a Barbarian 2, which means we get Danger Sense. This gives us advantage on dexterity saving throws unless we're incapacitated. I appreciate the sort of cleaning up of that feature compared to the 2014 rules, but the real reason we came Barbarian at all, of course, is, as is usually the case, for Reckless Attack. Still my favorite Barbarian feature. It continues to just give us advantage on all of our attacks that we make with strength, if we're okay giving our enemies advantage against us, and of course we are. But now it's improved over the old version in that it doesn't only work on our turn, meaning any reaction attacks we might make, opportunity attacks, etc., can benefit from advantage as well. And even though we don't need advantage as much as we used to, thanks to the change to Great Weapon Master, advantage is still really good and very welcome. Now at level 9, I actually want to go back to Fighter. Now, sure, getting a Barbarian subclass would be great, but all of the damage increasing Barbarian features from subclasses require us to be raging. And since I'm not assuming that we're doing that, back to Fighter we go. Though, again, if playing this character in game, I'd probably want to go Barbarian 3 because Barbarian subclasses are awesome, and chances are I will be raging most, if not every fight, right? But there is a big appeal to going Fighter 7 too, and it's that we get an additional fighting style at this level instead of at level 10, right, with the 2024 changes. And that means that we could take the thrown weapon fighting style, which says that if we hit with a ranged attack roll using a weapon that has the thrown property, we can add 2 damage to that roll. So it's time to start throwing our hand axes and to swap that scimitar out for a dagger or a light hammer, both of which have the nick property still. Their damage die is less, it's a d4 instead of a d6, but it's a net gain if we can add 2 to the damage, right? Wait a sec, I thought you said you weren't using any resources for this build. Wouldn't throwing your weapons be considered using resources? Okay, fine, you got me there. But, I mean, come on, we're level 9. If you try to tell me that your character could not afford the few dozen gold it would cost to have like a bandolier of as many hand axes and light hammers or daggers as you would need, then I'm gonna call you a liar. Or someone who's playing with the stingiest dungeon master who ever lived. Now, sure, if magic weapons are in play and we only have one like magic hand axe, right, then I can see this potentially being a problem. But I mean, if magic weapons are in play, then you need to have had a conversation with your DM a long time ago about what you're hoping to do with this character so that they can ideally get you a returning weapon a la the Artificer Infusion, right? Regardless, I'm not assuming magic weapons. I never do. And this will be a nice way to add a bit of damage to all of our attacks every round because, in case you hadn't heard, Reckless Attack now works with thrown weapons, not just for giant barbarians, right? They still have to be strength-based attacks, but even though we're making ranged attacks by throwing, it still uses our strength because the weapons that we're throwing are melee weapons, not ranged weapons. Capiche? At level 9, it is time for our next damage report. Since last check, the main increases we've seen are 1, all of our attacks are made with advantage now, thanks to Reckless Attack, and 2, each attack is adding 2 to the damage roll thanks to the thrown weapon fighting style, though for our Nick attack, the weapon will be a d4 instead of a d6. If we can be raging, the damage will be even better, but if we're not, against a 10 armor class here, we would do 44 damage per round on average, and against a 16, it would be 41 DPR. Not a huge increase against lower enemy ACs, but a fairly significant one at like middling and higher enemy ACs. Regardless, we're still talking like tier 4, maybe even upper tier 5 territory compared to old sustained DPR builds at this level, which is where you would kind of hope this build would be, right? Or else those old builds were fairly lackluster. At level 10, we'll end this first build here, right? And again, grabbing a barbarian subclass would be great, or even a feat if we went fighter 8. My favorite way to add some like resource-free sustained damage at this point would be to take a rogue level. That would give us Thieves' Cant so that we could leave coded messages in writing for others who could read them, but it also gives us expertise, letting us double our proficiency bonus in 2 of our skills, and combined with the fact that when we take a rogue level, we get an extra skill proficiency, and we can use our second wind to bolster our ability checks. We've got some decent little like ability check utility on this character here. But of course, the main reason that we wanted to go rogue on this build was for sneak attack, right? Because don't forget, you don't have to use dexterity to benefit from sneak attack. You just have to make the attack with a ranged or finesse weapon and have advantage on the attack or attack an enemy standing next to an ally. So just make sure that the offhand thrown weapon is in fact a dagger, which is finesse, and as long as we're attacking recklessly, we can always add sneak attack to that dagger throw once per turn. But that does it for build number 1, meant to play up to level 10. So how would I change the build if we were going for level 11 and beyond? Well, we'd start in the same place as a fighter, but then I'd just take fighter all the way to 11 without stopping. Nothing that we got from barbarian or even rogue outweighs getting a third attack with our attack action like we'd get from fighter 11, especially if we were using heavy weapons instead of 2-weapon fighting. And this is the biggest difference between the 2 builds, and is something that makes me actually really happy, but we'll get into that more as we go. So at level 1, I would also change the ability score setup here. Still go 15 strength plus 2, but then just a 14 con, a 13 dex plus 1, and then a 13 charisma here. We're gonna want that potentially for some multi-classing a little later. Not necessary, but it will give us a small bump. And then as our fighting style, instead of 2-weapon or thrown fighting even, we're gonna want, yes, the great weapon fighting style here, even though it's still bad. In fact, it's probably worse. Which is saying something since it was already terrible. It just says that if we make an attack using 2 hands with a weapon, any 1 or 2 is now just a 3. I mean, at least we don't have to spend time re-rolling. I'm taking it in the interest of exploring what's possible damage-wise, but again, I don't actually recommend it. It'll be a very minor bump. For weapon masteries, well, we are going to end up with a polearm. I'll talk about that more in a sec, hang tight. But in that case, yes, we're going to want weapon mastery with a halberd to have cleave, which would let us make an extra free attack against a second enemy on our turn if that enemy was standing next to the one we hit with the cleave weapon. This is pretty great. It's something I would plan on doing in every fight I was in where there were 2 enemies standing next to each other. I, of course, can't just assume that you have 2 enemies standing next to each other with this build, so instead we'll assume that we're using a glaive, which has the Gray's weapon mastery, which I also kind of love because I'm boring. Gray's just says that if you miss an enemy with an attack with this weapon, well, you still do damage to them equal to, for us, our strength modifier. And hey, a guaranteed no matter what 5 damage on our turn is kind of nice. Mathematically, on average, it's again not going to be a huge bump because thanks to the advantage that we'll have, eventually at least, our hit chance is pretty great, meaning that we won't actually benefit from that guaranteed graze damage all that often. But it will raise our average damage by a bit, and it won't require any assumptions on my part, so I'll take it. Fast forward to level 4, yes, you would take the Great Weapon Master feat here instead of Dual Wielder, which is going to bump our strength to 18 and let us add our proficiency bonus in damage to our attacks with heavy weapons that we make, but only attacks with our attack action, right? So no bonus action attacks, no reaction attacks even. And while that feels kind of bad, it's also part of what brings heavy weapons a little more in line with dual wielding and makes polearms and polearm master as a feat a lot less appealing and maybe, just maybe, that might be a good thing. If we're interested in variety and diversity, at least, especially if we can still do really good damage with weapons. Anyways, I have more thoughts, but let's move on for now. Because at level 6, when we get our second feat, we would actually take Polearm Master. Wait a sec, I thought you just said that Polearm Master wasn't appealing anymore. Yeah, I did. And it isn't. But again, if we only care about resource-free, no setup damage, it's still decent. Nothing else we've got going is adding damage with our bonus action every single round. And so even though this would only let us make a D4 weapon attack with the blunt end of our polearm, adding our strength modifier but not our proficiency bonus and damage from the Great Weapon Master feat, right? It's still a damage increase for us, so I'll take it. I don't mind that it bumps our strength to 19 at the same time either, opening up some fun half feat options with our next feat, right? Oh, and don't forget that the feat also lets us take a reaction attack when someone enters our reach, meaning that we will get a lot more reaction attacks on this character, which is great, and we'll again talk about more later. At level 7, when the champion gets their second fighting style, I'm going to say PYF here, pick your favorite. I'd probably take defense, maybe interception or blind fighting. But at level 8, you get yet another feat, right? And I'm tempted to say PYF as there are plenty of good +1 strength feats to choose from here. Slasher would be good for us, Skill Expert. I thought about Charger for that extra D8 once per turn, but I don't think I can comfortably say that we'd be able to do that every round, since it will often mean taking an opportunity attack in order to be able to move that 10 feet in a straight line, right? Like you're gonna have to back up and then charge forward to get that extra Charger damage. And even though we have some ways to do that, thanks to Second Wind, that's an expendable resource. And so yeah, that all just seems kind of too dependent on the situation. So instead, I'm just gonna say, let's take Sentinel. It just pairs so well with polearms since it reduces an enemy's speed to 0 if we hit them with an opportunity attack, though it does really bother me that the reaction attack we can potentially get from Polearm Master is no longer called an opportunity attack, so technically these things don't work together. But it does also say that if an enemy disengages from us or attacks an ally within 5 feet of us, we can make an opportunity attack against them. That used to say just reaction attack, right? And so now it feels like we're likely to be making a reaction attack really often enough that we might want to add it into our calculations. I kind of hate doing that for this build. I do really want this to be you can do at least this much damage every round, all the time, no assumptions needed. And yet, I did already make some assumptions about advantage thanks to Vex in the first build, and I do want to be as accurate as possible. Okay, fine. Let's say that between regular opportunity attacks that everybody gets, reaction attacks when the enemy enters your reach thanks to Polearm Master, and opportunity attacks when the enemy attacks your friend standing next to you thanks to Sentinel. I mean, that's a lot, right? We're going to get a reaction attack, 25% of the time? It's not going to have a huge impact because we don't get to add a Great Weapon Master proficiency bonus damage to it, but it will be a small bump. I do want to be as accurate as I can. I think I'm just going to say 25% of the time, reaction attack. At Fighter 9, we get Indomitable still, which is greatly improved for 2024, as it now lets us reroll a failed save once per day, but now also adds our fighter level to the roll, greatly increasing our chance of succeeding. That is awesome. We also get yet another new feature here, Tactical Master, which says that if we attack with a weapon whose mastery property we can use, like graze or cleave in our current situation, then we can replace that with push, sap, or slow instead. And that is so cool, because now we can keep using that glaive for graze if we miss, but then if we hit, it's not a worthless weapon mastery, right? We can slow them or knock them back or sap them to give them disadvantage on their next attack. And that's just really, really potent. I love the versatility here. At level 10, champions get a new feature, Heroic Warrior. This is great. It just lets us have heroic inspiration at the beginning of combat if we don't have inspiration already. And as a reminder, inspiration has changed and gotten better for most builds, most of the time anyways, where instead of giving us advantage on a thing, it lets us re-roll a failed D20 test. Right? So it's less likely to be wasted. Fantastic. But then yes, at Fighter 11, we get that thing that used to be unique to fighters until warlocks came along and infringed on our territory. Jerks. Extra attack, right? We can now make 3 attacks with our action instead of 2. And it's really at this point that the Great Weapon build overtakes the Dual Wielder build in sustained all-day resource-free damage. Why? Because even though you're doing 1 less attack than dual wielders would, that extra proficiency bonus to your attack action finally surpasses what you're doing with that extra attack, right? And again, I love that some weapons are better in certain situations and others are better in others. It makes it so much more interesting. Now, of course, the more things you can do to add damage to each attack, the better two-weapon fighting becomes by comparison. But regardless, it's pretty close, and I'm actually pretty impressed with the balance that Wizards has found here as a result. I should probably mention here as well, if you wanted to play this character from level 1 up to this point, right, instead of like starting at higher level, you totally could, and you could use both fighting styles actually, which is awesome. At level 4, I would take Dual Wielder, but then at level 6 for my feat, I'd take Great Weapon Master, but actually keep dual wielding. At level 8, I'd take Polearm Master, but keep dual wielding, and then at level 11, switch to your glaive. It could actually be a really cool story moment for your character to make this switch, and would also feel like a fantasy of being this true weapon master character who's a bit of a Swiss Army knife that's like an expert with anything deadly you put in their hands, right? Now, sure, going this route, your damage from levels 7 to 10 might not be quite as good as the first build that we laid out because you wouldn't grab those barbarian levels primarily, but it would let you kind of have your cake and eat it too and set you up to be the best I can do this all day damage dealer possible from level 1 all the way to the end of the game. Okay, at level 12, now that we've got that almighty third attack with our action, yes, we would here want to grab a couple levels in Barbarian. I'm not going to go over Barbarian 1 and 2 as we've already discussed what they look like. Rage, Unarmored Defense, more weapon masteries, Reckless Attack, Danger Sense, right? But once we've got Reckless Attack at Barbarian 2, we would be level 13, and that means it's time for our next damage report, our first damage report with this version of the build. As always, combat here is pretty simple. We run up to our nearest enemy and make 3 glaive attacks with the sharp end and our action, adding both our strength modifier and our proficiency bonus of 5 to each hit, and then a 4th attack with our bonus action with the blunt end of the weapon that just adds our strength modifier. All attacks are made with advantage, and like I said, I'm going to assume a 25% chance of getting a reaction attack too, though I do chafe a little at doing so for this build. Just a little. That attack wouldn't add the bonus damage from Great Weapon Master either, though it would have advantage from Reckless Attack now, thanks to the 2024 changes. That's great. And honestly, it's only going to be like 2 or 3 points of damage more on average, so it's not like we're totally throwing the numbers off here and skewing things. Anyways, against an enemy with a 10 armor class, we would on average do 64 DPR here, and against a 17 AC, it would be 62 damage per round. And yeah, advantage and even graze helps us keep our damage a lot more flat as the enemy armor class goes up, which is great. Compared to other sustained DPR builds I've done to date, it would still be like tier 4 against older builds, and similarly beating out that old baseline build once we get to like middling enemy armor classes and higher. All right, let's bring it home here. At level 14, there are great reasons for going back to fighter. Getting our crit chance down to where we crit even on an 18 would be cool, among other things. Or like sticking with barbarian, at least to pick up a subclass like we talked about. But I think once we've got reckless attack, if we really wanted to be the best I can do this all day character possible, we'd actually take some Warlock levels now. It's not a no-brainer. And so as one commenter pointed out, I guess it's a brainer. And it's also a little harder to justify now that Warlocks don't get their subclass at level 1. But compared to other options available to us, I think it's the best thing we could do to improve our resource-free, no setup, round after round damage. So go with me here. As a Warlock 1, we get an invocation. I'm going to say maybe take Pact of the Chain to have a little familiar to help us out, or maybe Pact of the Tome to grab some useful utility-based ritual spells. Always handy, but go ahead and pick your favorite here. As for spells that we pick up as a Warlock, I'm going to prioritize Armor of Agathis for a little extra temporary hit points and an ability to return damage to a melee attacker. Yes, by the way, I know they've changed the wording for the spell so that it would appear to, rules as written, continue to work if you replaced your Armor of Agathis spells with other temporary hit points, if you could get them from a different source and there were more of them, right? Potentially making the spell a lot more powerful. I'm not sure if Wizards of the Coast intended that, and whether they did or not, I'm not sure if I like it or not. I kind of do. I might try and build around it one day, but I might wait a bit to see if Wizards of the Coast comes out with some kind of errata document for things like this that might be unintended on their part. We'll see. At level 15, we'd be a Warlock 2, which gives us Magical Cunning. This lets us recover half of our Warlock spell slots once per long rest with just a 1-minute ritual. And then we do get 2 more invocations here. Go ahead and pick your favorite. I'm probably taking Devil's Sight, especially since halflings don't actually have dark vision. And Lessons of the First Ones might be nice to let us pick up another origin feat. But at level 16, we'd be a Warlock 3, and that means we get our Warlock subclass now, right? And yes, I would want to take my old favorite here, Genie, so that we could, among other things, get the Genie's Vessel feature, which would let us add our proficiency bonus in damage once on our turn when we hit with an attack roll, meaning 6 more damage per round for us, at least next level, right? That's not a ton. It might seem crazy to give up 3 levels for just 6 damage once per round, but considering our build and our rules, there weren't a lot of other options available. Yeah, in case you were wondering, I did crunch numbers for a ton of different builds here, including ones using finesse weapons with a lot more rogue levels, and nothing else that I tried to crunch numbers for could outpace this, considering our rules. And hey, we picked up some nice stuff with Warlock outside of a little more damage, so I have no regrets. Obviously, you can take a different route if you want, but anyways, also at Warlock 3, we get 2nd level spells. I'm just going to say PYF again. I'm not going to plan on using any of them for damage since they are an expendable resource. And yeah, there's some decent utility options too. Things like Misty Step, Spider Climb. Granted, you couldn't use those while raging, but sometimes teleporting or climbing up a wall might be more important. So at least you've got options. But then finally, for us, for this build at level 17, as for what class to take here, it feels weird to say, but PYF. Nothing is going to give us a damage boost here, I don't think. Barbarian would get you a subclass. Fighter or Warlock would get you a feat. Do what you want here. But yes, sure, I should probably mention that if you are taking this character all the way to 20, maybe especially if you're like starting the campaign at really high level, level 17, 18, 19, something like that, or it's a level 19 or 20 one-shot, then sure, you would be better off just staying fighter all the way, mostly because of that sweet epic boon. And I'm probably taking the boon of combat prowess in that case, so that once per turn I can just turn a miss into a hit. That's pretty awesome for just straight up all day sustained damage, right? And then yeah, the fighter capstone that would give us 4 attacks with our action. So great. But yeah, I would be really sad to miss out on those 2 barbarian levels especially, but levels 19 and 20 do look better as a pure fighter, even if you have to give up barbarian advantage. So feel free to just go pure fighter if you're going to go all the way to endgame. But assuming we went the route that we did and stopped at 17 for our final damage report. Since last check, we haven't done much to increase our output, really just a bump to our proficiency bonus and then that 6 damage per round from Genie's Wrath. But I do appreciate the utility and survivability we picked up along the way as well. Anyways, against an enemy AC of 10 here, we would do 83 damage per round on average, and against an 18 AC, it would be 78 DPR, which, you know, as a percentage compared to last check is a decent little increase. Though compared to older sustained damage builds, it's still in that tier 4 range. And compared to the old baseline, it is similarly worse against easy to hit enemies and better against average and high armor class enemies. So let's get into some final thoughts here, because I have a lot. The tier score for this baseline, I guess, if you just took the average damage that they did against every armor class we calculated for at each of the 4 damage reports, averaged them all into one big number, you'd end up with a 49, which is actually almost exactly the same as the old baseline build that I did. Wow. It is literally like half a point of difference. But it's half a point less. Oh my gosh, this definitively proves that 5.24 is worse for martials than the 2014 rules. Wizards of the Coast hates martial characters. Okay, deep breath. Before we claim that the sky is falling, let's consider that my little way of doing a tier score is totally whack. I give the same value to every enemy armor class from 10 to 25. That's not super helpful, right? It's easy for me to do the math for, but if we were instead to just take an average of all of the armor classes that were more likely to actually be fighting in game throughout our career, let's say armor classes 15 through 20, for example, the new baseline does a little better than the old one damage-wise. though yes, the results are remarkably similar still. So if the damage is roughly the same, let's think about everything else that has changed for martials. More utility, more survivability, more options in weapon choice, and diversity in what we can do in combat thanks to weapon masteries largely, and some feat changes. Depending on your subclass, some really fantastic control and or support options. I mean, the things martial characters can do in game, generally speaking, when you compare the 2024 rules to the 2014 ones, is, in my mind, vastly improved, even if the damage hasn't necessarily gotten a huge buff, though it did for plenty of builds and classes and subclasses, right? We're just looking at one single build here, for an example, right? Martials in general have gotten a big buff in all of the ways that aren't damage. So no, they didn't kill martials by nerfing Great Weapon Master and Sharpshooter. Okay, fine, ranged weapon damage dealers are probably not in a great place right now, but that's an argument for a different video. I think it's much more likely that damage is roughly the same or slightly better for most weapon-using classes, subclasses, and builds. In some cases, it's going to be a lot better. Outside of ranged weapon users, I don't think it's really ever going to be worse. But the power we get that can't be easily calculated on a spreadsheet has vastly improved. And you know what? I'm really happy about that. Would I have liked to see a bigger damage bump for non-spell casters? If I'm being honest, yeah, sure, I would have. I think there was room in the game for that to happen without throwing the balance of classes totally out of whack. But I still think that, generally speaking, martials are in a much better place under the new rules than they were before, and for that, I'm happy. Regardless, I had a lot of fun putting this thing together. It's good to know about what we could expect from a truly sustained, as in I can do this all day, damage build, so we can see just how far we can push the envelope when we let ourselves use up expendable resources to get to higher round after round damage. Would I play this build, this character in a longer campaign? As I've laid it out here today, probably not, if I'm being honest. But maybe with a more interesting fighter subclass, coupled with the cool barbarian subclass? Absolutely. And it would wreck. But even as I laid it out, I think it makes a great build, especially for newer players and or those who want to do great in combat, but maybe don't want to have to think about it or worry about it too much. If you're looking for something you can just point at the bad guys and let go, letting you put more of your brain power and energy into your story and your character and your roleplay, then this build is a perfect one to try out. So I hope you enjoyed it. That's the build for the week. I hope you guys know how much I love you, because I do. Thank you so much for all that you do for me, for this channel. You're the best. I hope you have a great day and a fantastic week. And you know what? If you don't, then I hope you'll hang in there. You are loved. I hope that you will do good and be kind, and that I see you again very soon. But until then, take care. Bye. You took my hand and held it up and shot my arm full of love, and it spread, whoa, whoa, and it spread into the world where there are no lines separating the truth from the lies. Oh man, the Abbott brothers, you guys. If you are not fans, you should become such. Those guys can just write their faces off. Yeah, that's my favorite of their songs, I think, and it spread. But so much good stuff. Check them out if you are unfamiliar. I'm a little tired today. Not because I've been playing Baldur's Gate 3 or poring over the new player's handbook, but because I have a guilty confession to make. My old World of Warcraft guildies have got me hooked on what's it called? Honkai Star Rail? Is that what it's called? Not Genshin Impact, same company. You know, it's just, yeah, I don't know. I mean, I'm human. I can want to play a game sometimes that's filled with lots of pretty anime ladies that beat stuff up, right? I'm not ashamed. Okay, maybe I'm just a little bit ashamed. But yeah, it's kind of got its hooks in me right now. And I'm not getting as much sleep as I should. I think I just spit a little. Don't say very cool, because it's just kind of cool on this build. I'm not really doing anything to take big advantage of crits. So yeah, cool. Oh, I can see you focusing on that dragon. Means I just need to scooch a little closer. Get a little closer. Don't be shy. Get a little closer. With Arid Extra Dry. It's amazing how commercial jingles from our childhood just stay with us forever until we die. I've never used Arid Extra Dry as a deodorant. I don't even know if they still make it, but I can sing the jingle. Since last check, the only real increases we've seen are, 1, all of our attacks are made with advantage now, thanks to Reckless Attack, and don't say the only real increases, because these are significant increases. If we were going for level 11, it's a lot of levels. Okay, fine. Ranged weapon. Okay, fine. Ranged damage. Okay, fine. Ranged weapon damage dealers. Wow, I'm struggling here.